Welcome, everybody, to Bobby Talks, ... Those dots are there to tell you that there's always more to the story. And today's story is, well, checking in on the me, myself, and I. That's right. We're talking mental health today, and who better to do it with? My friend Andrea Rumler. She is the telehealth counselor out of the Counseling Center of West Michigan. We're getting ready to dissect all things that are mental health, and I can't be more excited than to do it with you. Andrea, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. You know, it's so
Good.
often I'll ask my students, I'll say, hey, how's the morning going? You know, how's the day going?
Uh-huh.
And a lot of them will just say, fine. But every now and then I'll get that one student who's like, good, Mr. Gifford, how's your day going? And I'm like, thank you for checking in on me as well. I appreciate that. So it's just a
Mm-hmm.
small thing, but it's like it's a little bit an oversight in the public education world. So
Absolutely. I was at this one place kayaking, and it was a couple summers ago, but I had checked in with the service worker that was like just coming to grab our kayaks, and I like looked her in the eye and I was like, really, how are you today? And she was like almost in tears. And I was like, I really want to know. And she was so moved by that. So I think you're right. It's cool when we get that extra little bit.
yeah, it's kind of the small things that matter, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we say that all the time, but it kind of gets overshadowed and overlooked. It's like the small things add up so much, and they can play such an impact on our life. I know, like just the little things that you'll see those videos of paying it forward at McDonald's, you know, and then that person pays it forward. And I've once asked McDonald's, you know, how long was the longest that they went? And they said that they had one last almost 3 hours one time.
Wow.
That's
Wow.
impressive that one person started 3 hours worth of kindness. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've always wanted to be that person that starts it too. I haven't been. So maybe that's a good goal for the week. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it is. Um, Andrea, I just once again I appreciate you being here. This is something that's I've got a lot of feedback from just in the last couple of days of promoting the show. People are
Awesome.
excited about this one, and I think they're excited because it's something that is very prevalent in our lives, and I think in some aspect it's definitely prevalent in everybody's lives, whether they admit it to the same type of vulnerability as others tend to do. But we all need to check ourselves and kind of see like where am I at today with me, and I tend to try to do that more than I have probably in the past couple of years, and I have probably the first 32. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, what do you think about that? Like, how old were you when you started paying more attention to your mental health?
Definitely wasn't until college, and I'm kind of sad about that too, right? Like we always wish we were more aware of it growing up. And in a sense, we all are. We all have mental health, right? But it's the ways that we cultivate and stay present to it, like you just talked about. So, definitely was college for me. I was studying psychology. That's when I started yoga, which definitely changed my life and mental health as well. So, that kind of started me down that track. And I wasn't too sure what I wanted to do after school. And then I decided on counseling. So, that changed my direction as well. But after being in psychology, really starting a mindfulness practice, that's when I really started digging deep and okay, how am I? What makes up me? How do I move forward? What are my goals? What are my passions? And that became a daily habit and routine for me, and it stuck, and now I share it with other people for a living. So it's been a fun road.
Yeah, and it's fair to say that you're new to being on the counseling side, correct? Right? You've had a few different job changes here over the last couple of years. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I did my internship while I was getting my master's degree in counseling. I did that as a counselor at a domestic violence and sexual assault shelter. So that was my first real dive into it, and that opened my eyes quite a bit, as you can imagine. So that was super powerful of an experience for me. And then, yes, I went into the school, so a little bit different take.
Yeah.
Just kind of how my life ended up at that moment. So I ended up in the schools, and it was much more of the administrative tasks. I was the school counselor, but counseling fell by the wayside a little bit, which I was discouraged about. That was my passion, right? So I stayed in the schools for 2 years. I did some private practice work after school, so I was still utilizing my clinical skills, but not as much. And then, yeah, so this August I took a job change, and now I'm a full-time counselor, and I'm loving it.
Yeah, and you mentioned something about the public education system that you were maybe a little
Hmm.
shocked about. Is that there's such a, especially right now, and maybe I'm overreaching. I'm not 100% sure what your situation was, but um, a lot of times you go in there with the intentions of, having these great conversations with students and, building those relationships where they can confide in you. And that definitely took place. I'm 100%, I have confidence
Yep.
that took place. But a lot of times the building is short-handed on certain
Mm-hmm.
things and you are being pulled in every direction except doing your job. And at the end of the day, you leave and you're like, man, I did everyone else's job today except for my own. And that's just how public education system right
Mm-hmm.
now survives.
Absolutely. We were all really leaning on everybody, which is a good thing to see too. It was really community based, and I loved my coworkers. It was not anyone's fault or anything. It's just kind of how the system is, like you're saying, and we all have our own struggles and things we have to take care of in the job world. So, yeah, I did leave the building, and I was a little discouraged that the few meetings I had with students were beneficial and amazing, and I loved my time with them, but it didn't happen nearly as often as I was hoping it would. So I was really finding my own mental health. Talk about checking in with ourselves. That was my job, right? But I also had my own mental health to take care of, and
Yeah.
it was detrimental to my mental health. So I noticed that a change was needing to take place.
Well, I'm happy that you're in a place right now where you are, more at peace with yourself.
Mhm.
Just a quick note, just in case we lose each other here. If for some reason I go frozen and you're wondering what's going on, just end the call and then jump back on the call. Because that tends to happen right now. I have a lot of students of mine who are blowing up our comment section here. They love to hijack and take over the comment section. They're gonna love that I shouted that out. So, um,
Aw.
yeah. Andrew, I want to, before we kind of like get onto specific, conversations, so to speak, I want to take mental health and I really kind of want to dissect it if we can and figure out, and maybe it's different for everybody. I'm sure it's different for
Mhm.
everybody, but you knowing it on your side, when we talk about mental health, what exactly are we talking about? Yes, we're checking in on our mental health here and making sure we're happy or we're fulfilled. What are we looking at? What is something that when we talk about mental health, what is the goal? What is the definition of mental health on your side of things, being the professional, and what is it we should be striving to achieve?
This could be a 7-hour show in itself, I think.
I know it could be.
Um, Great question. No. So, yeah, it absolutely is different for every single person. The first session that I have with a client is based on their goals. So, I want to have that as part of that mental health too, because what it looks like for them is different from what I would say going into my own counseling session. So, that's their mental health that they need to focus on. But on the other end of that, they already have things they're doing well. So, that's also part of their mental health. For me, if I could give kind of an overall definition of it, it's our everyday wellness. So, how much are we taking into account, like our well being of our thoughts, of our body, of our interactions with humans? And I think those three kind of topics cover and could dive deeper into many different areas. So, just overall well being, daily functioning. How well is our daily functioning going? So, are we able to function at our job? Are we able to function in our home family lives? Are we able to function in our friendships? And maybe what are our goals or some of those things that we're noticing could improve, or just things we would like to process. So maybe things in our past that we need to process to function better. So just that daily wellness, I would say, would
Yeah.
sum it up. It could go so many different ways.
And the other thing that's crazy about daily wellness is that I don't know how you are, but with me is it can vary by the hour. It's
Mhm.
so crazy, especially as a school teacher. It's like I gauge myself. How did I teach that class? What was my mood
Yep.
by? How did I teach this next class? And I don't know if it's just like the day gets longer or you get moodier or if there's just some certain aspects of my job that I have to like, okay, I really gotta, you know, refocus here, kind of go at this class, make sure that they know that
Mhm.
there's nothing going on in my life and that I give them the best
Mm.
Mr. Gifford that they can get. But it varies so often. You could be in the best mood in the morning and then by time for no apparent reason at all, that you can at least identify a moment throughout the day, you
Mhm.
feel a little off. And I don't know how you combat that. But do you hear stories like that often, or is it more traumatic, more deeply rooted issues?
No, I hear stories like that all the time, and the clients that I see vary in the intensity of the services they need. Am I still here? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Sometimes my Wi-Fi jumps out, so
Sometimes
yeah,
I'll just be really still.
I didn't know, so that was good. Yeah, so I see clients with that absolutely just every day, kind of wondering the same things you are, like what could have happened. And I like to encourage too, just like the overall awareness of that. So not placing judgment, like it's not right or wrong that you're feeling a little off, just the fact that you're noticing that, and then deciding what's best for you in that next step to show up how you need to. So maybe it is letting the kids know, like, hey, something is going on, but I'm going to give you my best right here and right now with what I got. So it can look a little different for everybody, but yeah, absolutely, we are humans and we fluctuate with our feelings and our happiness and emotions, and that's normal. So definitely not a disorder by you feeling a little off in the day, but yeah, just being aware of those feelings.
Yeah, and you're right. It is perfectly normal, and I think that's the whole awareness part of it, right? Is
Right.
trying to destigmatize all of these feelings and thoughts, and not make sure they don't get put into like a certain box that
Yeah.
identifies us or labels us, right? How would
Yeah.
you say our movement right now, as a collective whole in the United States, or maybe in this region of the United States, how would you say we're doing with the whole mental health awareness? It feels like it's a conversation that's had a lot. I see it all the
Mhm.
time on my Instagrams and my social medias. It feels like it's something that's very much in the zeitgeist of society, where maybe 10 years ago we wouldn't have had this conversation. Where do you think we're at with it?
Absolutely, I think you're correct. It's been exciting to be kind of the chair that I'm sitting in and looking at it from a clinician's point of view and seeing how the world is kind of shifting in this conversation. It's much more forefront than we have seen in the past, and just what I've experienced in my lifetime. And I know that can look different for many people too. So it depends on the family that we grew up in. Therapy was never mentioned in my family. We didn't really talk about our emotions, right? So just learning that was really hard for me too. But now witnessing like the nationwide and worldwide conversations surrounding mental health has been amazing to see. So I think it's becoming more and more important and just out in the open too. Hopefully becoming more accessible. I know that's a big conversation that needs to be had too, is how can people access these services that are so important and life saving. So I hope that that's where that continues to go to. And just insurance wise, too, it's been cool to see they added a full time telehealth availability. So now,
Yeah.
before it was just COVID, right? It was just being offered during COVID, but they've seen how many more people have accessed it. So they're going to keep it on insurance, which is phenomenal.
No, that's actually one of those blessing in disguises that came from this pandemic,
Hmm.
right? Is that a lot of people have figured out ways to. I can't believe insurance is doing that.
Yeah.
That's a great response by them. Um,
Hmm.
Well, how do I want to ask some of these questions? So you had mentioned that is there a huge shortage? Let me just start here. Is there a huge shortage with the with your profession and people in your job field?
I wouldn't say a shortage of therapists, but a shortage of accessibility. So I'm really limited with the insurances that I can see. And then maybe the ones that can accept more insurances, they have a really long wait list. So it's really kind of dependent on the area. If you want telehealth, the insurance that you have, your schedule. Some clinicians can't see you at all based on your schedule. So it's kind of dependent on a few different things. So maybe not a shortage on therapists, but a shortage on that accessibility.
Okay. Yeah, that's tough, especially when you were in
Mhm.
the public education world last year, because
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like I don't I we won't talk ill of anything, but just in that general sense, you did have certain people don't understand when you're on your side of it. So like I was the dean of students. So I was not a licensed counselor, but I was put in a position where I was, regardless of my
absolutely.
certification, I was, right?
Yeah.
And there it just needed to be done. There was certain kids in certain relationships that needed to be checked in on multiple times a week.
Yes.
Um, Definitely at the minimum once a week. And even that got lost, trying to make the building survive. Um, and we can argue whether or not we can do more with subs, and there's not subs. So there's a
Sure.
lot of things, right? But that's a problem, is that this accessibility thing is that, yes,
Mhm.
the awareness is there, but I agree with you 100%. It still feels like, okay, now I'm aware that I might have
Mhm.
some issues or some struggling challenges in my life. But now what do I do with it if I can't reach Andrea Rumler until
Mhm.
mid-November?
Yeah.
That's a challenge, right?
And I saw too, just the school that I was working in that community, it wasn't as talked about with parents or staff, and it was really really hard to kind of overcome those barriers and to make parents see that this was needed. So that was another challenge, and one I was happily going to do, right? But that's just another thing that lays in the way of getting adolescents the help that they need too. And sometimes it's not just them. They could tell me right to my face that, yeah, I probably need to go to counseling. Yes, I'm interested. Yes, I want this. And then all these other challenges are in their way too. So, yeah, the accessibility piece, I think, is a major struggle.
Yeah, it is. And hopefully we can figure out a
Mhm.
way, especially in the public education system, because I'm a firm believer, I'm sure you are too, that the more we can get these challenges addressed, the sooner we can get them addressed and get them
Mhm.
to have good kind of practices, good disciplines, good habits to tackle them. The better off they'll be as adults. And because
Mhm.
it's not like these challenges go away, right? It's just
Right,
maybe
right.
presented in a different format or a different way. So yeah, it's a real struggle. And I know a lot of people that do struggle with mental health. You'd mentioned though your family,
Mhm.
and I'm curious as to not you don't have to give me specifics, Andrea, but
I'm an open book.
you're an open book. Okay. So with your family, do you feel that now that you are trying to educate people on mental health and that it's a real issue with the older generation, it tends to be um, and this isn't always the case. I'm generalizing here,
Sure.
but it
Yeah.
tends to be these kids today need to, they're too soft. They don't necessarily think the word mental health gets thrown around too much, which at times it might, kind of like the word bully in the public education world.
Sure.
It does. But as a professional, you have to take every single claim serious, right?
Yes.
And I would argue, if somebody's claiming they have mental health challenges, they probably do, right? Because
Mhm.
nobody's going to claim that doesn't. So, how do you combat your own family? How do you educate them? Um, and do you find it to be successful?
This is my own counseling session now.
Yeah, I flipped the
Yeah.
table on you a little bit.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it because I'm the one listening all the time. So this is fun to talk about. Yeah. So my family, they're amazing and they really support what I do now. It's not like they were abusive or manipulative in any way growing up, but it was just something that we really didn't have that conversation about. Like I didn't even know that, people were attending counseling on the regular, any of that. Like it was just kind of veiled from me. So now that I'm older and we've all kind of molded into this new relationship with each other, I think it's much more easier to talk about these sorts of things, especially given my profession. But I'm also challenging them a little bit too by being more open about things that go on, the feelings that they have, how we can best support each other. So I'm blessed with that really open family too now, that is open to the challenges that I present. But I know everybody's not like that, so they can't go to their family and be like, "Hey, I really need to go here," or "Hey, this is what I think, this is what I need," because it won't be met with that same respect. So
Yeah.
I found it pretty easy in my family, thankfully, but I know that's not always the case.
Yeah, it's maybe it's not always the case. I know I'm glad though that you have that open relationship with your
Mhm.
family, and that it sounds like you guys have kind of come together, and at times
Yeah,
it probably does make you more close because you've shared such vulnerable things with each other that even
right.
families, you think with your families you've shared everything together, but in reality it's like everybody's trying to kind of present a face and hold it together for everyone. And whenever that foundation is kind of teetered with, it really does rock a family to its core, and it presents them with challenges that they have to overcome. And it sounds like in your case, your family is done swimmingly. So, um, let's dive in here if we can. Okay,
Yeah,
we're already about 20 minutes into the show, and I know a lot of people have specifics and just to give the audience more of a broad perspective, what I want to do is I want to kind of bring once a month. I want to bring a mental health show to the table here. And I'd like to be more specific on those shows about what we're tackling that day, whether it be toxic relationships or how to get back into dating, or things of like, how do I battle with my depression versus chronic depression, things of
sure.
that nature. But what would you say, and maybe it varies, what do you think people struggle with the most right now? And what can we do? What can I do to help you?
Sure. So I will preface this too by saying that I work mostly with trauma clients and depression and anxiety. So when I speak, I'm trained in those modalities too to work with those clients. So most of the things that I will be talking about are from those practices, just to preface that too, because you might have a therapist. I love that you're doing that too, a different month that brings in different perceptions. So that's beautiful. What I think right now people are struggling the most with are those everyday routines, especially given COVID. It threw a wrench in a lot of things. So, getting back on track of what serves you the best every single day, what looks like a healthy pattern for you every day. And then the other thing that I would say people are struggling with the most right now is community.
Okay.
So finding a sense of community, it's so easy right now to stay at home and stay behind the screens and maybe feel a little bit of community because it feels really safe right now, probably, which is okay. But not being involved in a community and seeing our friends and seeing those healthy people in our life, not necessarily family, just those healthy people in our life and going out and being involved in the communities can be detrimental to mental health.
Andrea, you're kind of touching a little close to home here right now. You
Mhm.
asked me how long I've had this podcast, and
Yeah.
I've had it now a year. And if you go
Mhm.
back to the reasons why I've started this show is because I'm a man in my early to mid 30s. At that time, I was 33 when I started the show. I'm 34 now, and I have seen my social circle
Mhm.
uh, come and go.
Yeah.
Most of my friends, they are either domesticated with their families now,
Mhm.
or they have moved to other parts of the country. I have some friends in Lansing, some friends in Cleveland, some friends in Columbus. I'm actually going to a wedding this weekend. It's in Sandusky, but um, one by one, you find yourself in this situation where you're like, wait a minute, what
Mhm.
happened to my weekend, or what happened
Yeah.
to my social circle, where it feels like your sense of community, and it's such a good word to use, is that it doesn't exist right now. So I started this show up last year to try to broaden my sense of community, right?
Yeah.
To
Yep.
create relationships and friendships with people that are longstanding. And it is proven to be the best thing that I've done, because it's allowed me to have interactions. Even people that aren't on the show, they're like, hey, Robert, we watch your show. And it allows me for have conversations with them, and I get such positive feedback. So
Mhm.
that has been crucial for me. But I must admit, for a long time, I struggled trying to figure out, where does a man in his mid 30s, early 30s go to find these relationships now?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
this isn't even talking, like in a dating aspect. This is talking just like,
Right.
where do I find my friends? Because it's so
Yes.
crucial and important. And there's another part, is that, where does someone in their 30s find another person who, because I'm not alone, right? And
Right.
you see these people all the time.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Where do these people go to find each other and make it feel organic, and not like a setup date to find a friend? You know what I mean? Because those are important too, to the foundation of people. So I don't know, that you really struck a chord with me there, I suppose. But I must say I'm on a much better place now. But community is huge. I know that for sure.
And you found that place that was so beneficial for you and healthy for you, and that was organic, and that spoke to your passions too. So you've done all the right steps, is what I would recommend to somebody. So that's good on you, and I commend you for that too. But I did hear a little bit there that speaks to mental health too, that belonging piece. You said,
Yeah.
where do I go to find people like me? Where do I go to have that connection? And I think that's the biggest piece right there is we're humans and we need belonging. We need that sense of belonging and we need that sense of connection. So especially throughout this last year and a half through COVID, if you didn't have that already set up for you, man, look at that challenge now too. So just more barriers in the way that are able to people are able to overcome them. So like you did, you found that really good niche for yourself and an outlet and connection. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, it was a challenge, and I wish it was this particular challenge in my life that made me start examining my mental health, because up until that point, I had kind of,
Sure.
fortunate. I had kind of been surrounded by mostly good people, and that's what they tell you to do is surround yourself by good people.
Yeah.
And you eliminate the toxic ones, and you try to get those
Mm-hmm.
bad actors in your life out, and you just pursue the good every day. But it took me a long time to kind of get to that place where, I'm examining myself. I'm saying, okay, what am I really doing here?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still, obviously we do this every day, but that was something that
Right.
I did for the first time. And I wish I would have found it sooner, but I'm here now. So I guess that's a good point. Right. So, um, let me talk about mental health though. When it comes to, like, if we were to dissect it, break it down to its earliest stages, when you were in the public education world, what would be the thing that attributes to a child struggling with their day to day? Is it always, does it always have to be in a traumatic experience? Or could a second or third grader just be like, I'm feeling off? I mean, but what is it you see in the public education world? Because as a teacher, I would love to be able to identify
Mm.
these, these kind of, not red flags. I don't like that. It's a bad term in my opinion, but like identify these symbols or these signs sooner and figure out how I can help. What did you see specifically in the public education world?
Yeah, so many things come to mind. The first thing that I think is absolutely vital to helping these students with their mental health is the relationship. And that's true as a full time counselor now, too. If the relationship between the client and myself is not healthy and positive and they don't feel connected to me, no work is going to get done. So the fact that you're even worried about what to look out for your students proves to me that you're worried about your relationship with them, which is doing more work than you know. So I always recommend, as a counselor in the school too, I always recommended to teachers build that relationship first with that student, and you're more likely to see the differences or the nuances in their behavior and their emotions, because they'll show you every behavior has a purpose. I'm sure you've heard this.
Yep.
Um, and we're showing it, right? Like we have actions in every given moment. So once we can be more attuned to a person's behaviors and patterns, we'll know a little bit more when they're off by that relationship that we have built up. And that's true with any person. So, not just those students, but staff members too, right? Like, we'll be able to notice when they're a little bit off, maybe feel more comfortable asking them openly, hey, what's going on today? And they're probably more apt to tell you too if they have that good relationship. I always tell this one story because it will probably stay with me forever, but a teacher had stopped a student and said, hey, are you okay in the hallway? Because they were visibly just walking different. The teacher just quickly passed them, and the student kind of responded a little off. The teacher had a relationship with the student, a positive one. And the teacher came and got me and was like, hey, I really think you should check on this student that otherwise I would have never had on my radar. And I ended up having to do a pretty serious crisis intervention. And if that teacher had not brought that student to me, given his relationship and just that little red flag that went off and contacted somebody who could follow up, that student might be in a different place right now. Not physically, right? But like
Right.
mentally,
Yeah.
mentally might be in a really worse off state right now. So just that relationship that was built and being attuned to those minute little features.
Yeah. It's so interesting because mental health, we talk about it and then we never really realize that it's the key player to the physical health, right? Everything
Right.
is connected. And every
Mm-hmm.
time your physical nature, and in the education world, there's a lot of times where you'll see young girls, young boys lead to things such as cutting or, things of that
Right.
nature that is so upsetting to see as a teacher because clearly they've gotten to a point where they've somehow either
Right.
felt not heard, invisible, something is
Mm-hmm.
not making them feel like they can thrive in life. And it always hits me like just like a ton of bricks where I'm like, man,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to breach this subject because maybe, especially
Yep.
at a new school here, I don't necessarily have the relationships built
Mm-hmm.
yet where I'm going to get that. And I feel if I go too soon, so I have to rely on someone like an Andrea Rumler where I can, hand them, not necessarily hand them off, but be like, hey, Andrea, I need you to check in.
Again.
That way we're
Yeah.
kind of tag teaming this. But even as adults, when we start taking to the bottle or we start taking devices, and we're trying to do everything but solve the mental health problem by
Right.
trying to, mask it with something else, that has a detriment on our physical health. And I don't think at times we pay enough attention to the two and realize that they're completely connected.
I want to bottle that up and play it for everybody. Yes.
Sure.
I think that's the biggest thing is being so aware, going back to that awareness, which I think it all stems. The first few practices I usually do or did with students and now my clients uh, are awareness practices. So, like quick body scans. How is your body really doing? Do you notice any tension in your body? Can we connect our breath to that tension in our body? Can you send your breath down to your feet? So, like just checking in on all these different things and seeing if we are noticing any emotions in the body or is it connected with our mind, because it is, and it gives us a little heads up. Either our mind or our body gives us little like little shout outs that we might need to pay more attention to something. Yeah, so I love that you said that, and I think that's so true with children, adolescents, and adults, is that validation piece. I heard you say that, so I wanted to go back to that. If we do not have an outlet where we feel safely heard, it's hard, and we
Yeah.
we take up those unhealthy coping strategies, which people aren't in their fault all the time, right? Because that's, we're taking care of ourselves the best way we know how. We're doing the best we can in any given moment that we have been taught. So until we are challenged and until we take it that step further, we're doing what we can.
Yeah. How often do you find people struggle with being honest to themselves?
In school, I struggled with that a lot. It's a little bit, I don't want to say better, but I've seen a little bit different side of it now in the private practice world because people are seeking me out.
Right. So
So
they're there with the purpose of knowing they
yes,
want to. Yeah.
correct. I still see areas where they maybe aren't telling the full truth to themselves yet, but at some point, something said to them, I might need some more help. So they sought me out. It was a little bit different, and it still is with the adolescents I see, because maybe it's their parent that is making them go, or maybe they've been hospitalized for suicide and the court is making them go because if not, CPS is have to get involved. So there's so many different stipulations to adolescents, but for adults, now that I'm more so in this private practice world, they are choosing to come to me, and then we can kind of really work on what they're seeing in themselves.
Yeah, it's almost like being a teacher and feeling like at times you are more of a
Uh-huh.
babysitter than you are a
Yes.
teacher. So being a
Yeah.
college professor might be different than that. I could see
Yep.
how things would feel a little bit different for you. Um, yeah, that's it's a really that's really a different world for you. So I'm happy for you. Um, do you find with your I want to kind of transition to depression. You know, how to, and it's a tricky word and I don't want to label anything, but like what I've learned with depression is that you really don't have an extreme anything, right?
Hmm.
You're not really, the way I heard it once was that if I was to hear of a death in my family, it wouldn't make me come any lower. If I was to win the lottery, it wouldn't make me come any higher. You just are in this brain fog. How does one begin to overcome a chronic case of depression? And I know I'm kind of hitting you with a lot of these
Nope.
blanket statements, but I'm not 100% sure who's listening right now, and I want everybody to
Hmm.
feel like they were, heard. And I know some of my friends do suffer from, and it might not be every day, but it's, if you were to put it on a map of 365 days, I'm sure it would take up majority of their year. So
Hmm.
what would you how does someone start day one?
That is a big question. And obviously, I would always recommend therapy if you're feeling you're in that place. But yeah, great question. The clients that I see for depression really describe it just like you said, with that numb feeling. So they've lost all interest in their day to day activities, even things that used to bring them lots of joy now don't anymore. And that is the chemical imbalance in the brain, too. So, but our brain is also really moldable, and that neuroplasticity is no joke.
Uh-oh.
It is has some serious healing depression. Oh,
Did we lose her?
am I
Andrea, can you
back?
hear me? Can you hear me now? I think we
Yes,
might
I
have
can hear
got her back.
you.
I think we. All right, I can see you now. I can hear you. So the last thing we heard as a listener was the neuroelasticity we're talking about.
Neuroplasticity, yes.
Neuroplasticity. You said it's
So,
no joke, and then that was the last thing we heard. Go ahead.
yes. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so that neuroplasticity is something that I always point out as a positive. So depression is not going to change overnight. I could give you all the hacks to kind of improve things, and it's not going to change that next day. So what's really important with treating depression is that consistency. So getting up and doing things, even for 5 minutes, like behavioral activation is a really big piece in treating depression too, because it kind of switches our mind into that cycle of activity rather than inactivity. So, yeah, and not force yourself into things that are uncomfortable. Can you still hear me?
Yep. Still got you.
Okay. Okay, good. So, not forcing yourself into doing things that are uncomfortable, but learning enough skills to kind of get your brain into that cycle of activity and those good habits that maybe do bring you joy. And you can process those emotions safely and reconnect with that part of you that you were feeling before too. So on
Yeah.
day one, you said what to
Day
do on day
one.
one.
From day one, right? And day one leads into day two, and day
Mm,
two leads into day 20. I mean, it's the only way you can get there.
yes.
So it's
Yeah.
such I feel for people. I have such great empathy. I don't know if you ever heard of this
Mm-hmm.
term, an empath. Have you heard of that? Did we,
I lost you for that word. What did you say? I'm sorry.
have you ever heard of the term an empath or an empath? I'm not 100% sure if I'm saying it
Yep.
correctly.
Yep.
You know what it
Empath.
is? I have a buddy of mine who feels almost
Mm-hmm.
everybody's energy as soon as he walks in a room, and then all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden will attribute it to himself as if he's the person that changed everyone's energy. And that's a very real thing. But I have such great empathy after listening to him and then listening to some of my other friends with some of the things that they go through, because you want to reach out and help, but you need for
Mm-hmm.
them to fight back. And I know that sounds
Mm-hmm.
so, it sounds so trite at times. It sounds so like I'm being not understanding, but it's like I can listen forever. I can
Yep.
suggest, advise, I
Yep.
can do a whole bunch of other things in between. But like I can throw you the support when you're in the water, but you have to decide to grab it. And when you watch people that you care about day in and day out not decide to grab it, and you want to grab it for them and bring it closer, but you know that ultimately won't lead them to the road that they need to, you know, to a path of recovery or a path of happiness or fulfillment or whatever it is they're seeking. I That's the part that I struggle with. Because then at some point you feel like, well, I have to move on, right? Because you can only for your own mental health, right? So how would
Mm-hmm.
you advise those that are like the empaths or the empaths who feel like, okay, we've reached out, we continue to, but they're not reaching themselves. So what do you do for their mental health? What do you do for the people that um, are on the other side of the coin? What should they do? Are they abandoning their
My
friends?
my favorite word, boundaries.
Boundaries. Okay.
And that's kind of been like a taboo word here. Yep, boundaries. Um, it's been popping up too, more so in some social media posts and just conversations that I'm hearing more. So I'm happy to hear that too. It can be crucial too to protect our own mental health. So you're not taking away that caring that you have for your friend. You are absolutely still there to support and maintain that friendship. But yes, you're right. At some point, you cannot make those decisions for them. That is out of your control. So, what can we do to control our relationship? How can we still give in a way that is supportive, but still take care of our own needs too? So, I discuss with people a lot, what do healthy boundaries look like? At what point do you feel that energy being taken from you rather than giving back to you? And where can you kind of find that middle ground of, okay, I feel comfortable still supporting them in that way, but I'm going to stop after that point because I have to do it for my own health. So I would recommend for empaths because that's a very real thing. If we're not able to differentiate between your emotion, my emotion, their emotion, the world's emotions, right? We take in so much negative news. What are those boundaries and how can we implement them?
Yes, Andrea, you just hit on something. The news and the world around us. COVID, you talked about that
Oh my
earlier.
God.
Um, let's talk social media. How much do you
Oh,
attribute
goody.
in your studies? Right now, I'm showing my students The Social Dilemma. And are you familiar with that documentary?
I haven't seen it, but I'm very familiar. Yep.
Okay. So basically, it shows them the inner workings of what's happening behind the scenes, the manipulations that are taking place, so that because they are spending so much time. We did a kind of a check in on how much time they spend on their phones, and this goes to adults too. We are not by any means um, different or better than our the younger generation in this case. We're spending so much time on our phones, interacting in these social media apps. Do you find in your studies that there is an increase in mental health challenges and issues from the time social media kind of became prevalent? Um, how much do you attribute social media playing a part in people's mental health? Because, in my opinion, it is a huge factor just off without even looking at data.
Mm-hmm.
In the Social Dilemma, they talk about young kids not getting validations through posts or likes or hearts or the type of, they can feel invisible in school, and then when they go home, they feel invisible in the network or online, and that's you've doubled down now. Where it used to be, you just felt one way at the school, and then you kind of hopefully came to a safe place at home. How much do you notice or attribute social media to being a detriment in people's lives?
Hugely, but it comes with positives too. So it's always dependent on the person. For adults, I always see that maybe they're a little bit more apt to implement those boundaries. They're a little bit more aware of how it's affecting them, hopefully, right? Sometimes we have more skills as adults to deal with those negative impacts too. We can more so voice them, we can talk about them, hopefully, right? These are all givens too. But yeah, so it can be a really positive thing. Just like you said, little side story here. My friends are all over the country. So a really positive thing of social media is staying connected to them. We do a weekly book club, not weekly, quarterly book clubs, monthly cooking classes. So like beautiful ways to stay in touch. But now take that middle schooler who maybe doesn't have the best coping strategies right now. They're not getting validation at home. They're not getting support at home. Now they're trying different ways to stay connected to their peers, maybe by posing a different way on social media, trying to come off a different way when they don't receive that same reciprocity of emotions and connections that they're looking for. Now we're in some trouble because now we maybe don't have skills to deal with those negative emotions either. And the biggest thing that I found, especially working in the public schools, was the anonymity,
Yeah,
being anonymous. So
and anonymity. Yeah,
yes, that one. Yeah, so being able to take your identity out of it and say these hurtful things to people, and then being on the receiving end of that was just rampant in the schools for
yeah.
middle, even into elementary. So all throughout K-12, it was a huge issue. And so then you add that with all the other stresses from social media. I think it does do some damage. And then you are taking away time from being in person with your family or friends or being outdoors or doing like problem solving activities with toys. Like you're taking away all these other developmental milestones, right, for these growing brains, and it does some damage for sure.
Yeah, it's a scary thought to say that we've dove headfirst into this world of social media,
Mhm.
and it's not going
Mhm.
away. It's only going to
Right.
become more of us. I was having an interesting conversation with my students today about the history or the future of cell phones and Elon Musk and how he's created this Neuralink and how they think one day we'll have a Google search engine that's kind of implemented and attached to our cerebellum. And it sounds a little outrageous. But the way technology is going is that, you know, these things exist. So what's it going to look like in the zeitgeist of society? And, how are we're not doing well with what it is right now. I can't imagine if we continue to take the thinking portion of it away and continue to look for validation in things that aren't real. Because it happens all the time. It's these filters. You had mentioned filters. What is wrong with looking the way we look? I was looking cold and I was freaking out. I was like 5 minutes before air. I was like, man, I gotta make myself a little bit more warmer here. Why are we so obsessed with this stuff? Why do we contribute in this thing if we know it's so detrimental to who we are, Andrea? Like, why do we? Because I can't understand it. I don't know why we do it. What is it that makes us wired to be liked, or is that what it is? Does it just come down to that? Why do we participate in something that we know is, ultimately it could be bad?
You just talked yourself right into that one. Yeah, it's that connection piece. It's the wanting to be liked. It's the connection with the peers. So that's ultimately what we're seeking. And humans are innovative, right? We see what works. So those influencers that we see on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. What are they doing? Let's do some more of that, even if it's not healthy, right? And then we mold to have our posts look a certain way, or our activities, or whatever it may be, the locations, the sayings, everything that we do, because we see that it works and these people are gaining attention. They have traction. They have lots of likes. They have lots of positive comments. So let me try to be more like that. And like you said, it does have some positives. I follow so many amazing people on social media that are inspirational to me, informative, and they kind of progress my mental health in a really positive way. But that's not always the case if we don't have skills.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I tend to tell this to people a lot, is that once I've realized what it is that when you realize that it's toxic people that are draining you of your energy and draining you, but that's all you've known, and that's kind of your social circle, it's very hard to separate yourself from that, because then you do end up finding yourself on a Saturday night sitting at home and you're trying to make peace with that.
Sure.
It's hard to do that when you're, maybe a single middle-aged person with children, and you're like, man, how do I even begin to figure this thing out and get back together? Man, we're almost out of time here. We're down to our final 10 minutes. She's got a hard out, ladies and gentlemen. She's got trivia tonight, so we got to get her to it. There's so many things here that I wanted to dive into, but let's go to anxiety.
Part 2?
Yeah, we might have to. I'll have to have you on next month if we can. Anxiety.
Yes.
Is that an overused word?
I don't think so. Maybe underused.
Underused.
And it
Okay.
doesn't have to be that disorder. I mean, we all experience anxiety for many different things. So I think if more people talked about it, the better, actually. And noticing maybe what those triggers are for us, maybe what helps with us. But no, we could definitely all experience anxiety for given things. And it doesn't always lead to that generalized anxiety disorder. Perhaps, maybe it does. And that's totally valid too, obviously. But yeah, we all experience anxiety on a day-to-day basis. So understanding it more and how it looks in ourselves is always a good conversation.
Do you feel that we over-medicate as a solution?
This is a highly controversial topic in my field of work.
I know it is. That's why we're here.
So I operate mostly from a holistic standpoint. But with that being said, I think medication is crucial to mental health and definitely a stepping stone, maybe a whole life of that helps our brain do what we need it to do. And if we're not experiencing those negative side effects that are going to impact our lives, by all means, please do whatever works best for you. So I am never anti-medication, ever, ever. I've seen it do life-changing and life-saving things.
Can you touch on the holistic approach? I mean, I know what it means, but can you just, for our audience, those that might not understand what you mean by that?
Sure. So that's more so looking at that mind-body connection, and that's kind of that simple way to put it. So maybe medication does help with that, but first maybe let's look at what else is going on with your body, with the food that you eat, with the movement that you do, with the other activities in your life. How does stress look in your life? Because that has such negative impacts on your mind and body too. So just looking at more so the person in its whole entirety. different aspects of life. I'm not just sitting in session with you wondering how it's going with your boyfriend, right? I want to
Right.
know everything that's going on. So maybe past relationships, just your upbringing, everything like that, and taking that into account of your whole being. So not just one part and one solution, but more so looking at your whole humanhood.
Yeah, it's the whole being is like you said, it's the everything that makes us
Mhm.
human, it's the mind body soul connection. I've always I mean, I've never drank, smoked a day in my life, and I whether that was a conscious decision or just it's turned into a conscious decision. It's
Sure.
because it's my identity, right? So everything I
Mhm.
now I say that, and last night it got a little late, and I still had Nate, so I did go to McDonald's. So I take that. I'm not perfectly at executing by any means, but I will say where I was a year ago versus where I'm at now, I'm more conscious of the McDonald's and how many times I
Yeah.
eat there. But
Yeah.
it's not bad on McDonald's. McDonald's is great, but yeah, there's this whole connection. If you look good, feel good, be good, and I tell
Mhm.
I tell the students a lot of the times, or my players, I coach, I'll say, we got to fake it till we make it, guys. We're not at this level yet, but we've got to train and perform and execute every day like we are. It's just a whole lot of that. So I really subscribe to that way of thinking too. That's why I asked you the question, because I do tend to think that at times, because there's such a hard accessibility with therapists, and
Mhm.
not a lot of people know how to organize their thoughts to even identify
Right.
what's happening in their
Yes.
life. And when you have that and you're talking to a bunch of different friends and you're getting a bunch of different people who all mean well, but you're getting a bunch of different advice, it can be
Right. Yes.
hard, So
Yeah.
you do tend to, what can I do today in this moment
Mhm.
to feel better? And that's why I always tend to think that it is over medicated. And I just
Mhm.
hate that because I wouldn't do it. But you're right.
Right.
It's a case by case situation, whatever brings you peace. And if
Yeah.
you find that it's best for you, great. I would love to see people do other areas first if they can. But I'm really, I guess that's a lot of judgment on something I probably shouldn't judge, because I don't personally feel like I suffer from a chronic thing of anxiety. So,
Sure.
yeah,
Well, I wanna follow that up too with saying, I love to see my clients too, right? So I wanna see them medicated and in therapy, right?
sure.
Maybe,
Both.
just like you said, opening up that accessibility. Yes, both obviously is the preferred treatment, but obviously some situations are different, so they do it the best they can. I would like to go back and maybe end on, it's kind of a big topic, but I wanna bring it up because I think it's life-saving and amazing. Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. Please do. What do you got
Another
for us?
topic? Okay. So it kind of wraps in depression and anxiety that we were talking about, but also a big healing factor for trauma, which is
Okay.
primarily what I work with. The polyvagal theory.
Say that one more time. Say that one more time.
I, I was going to say, I'll say it again. Polyvagal. So
Okay.
just like poly, Polyvagal theory. This is kind of up and coming in the mental health world too. Not up and coming, but becoming more popular. So basically, it's the fight or flight, the freeze, and the shutdown. So we typically know those, right? And if we think of it like a ladder, that shutdown is at the bottom, fight, flight, or freeze, and then at the top is the part that's super important. It's the safety zone. So that safety state. What brings us back to that safety state? Because that's where relationships happen. That's where trust happens. That's where vulnerability happens. That's where healing happens. So, if there's a basis of mental health that I always go back to in my counseling profession, it's this theory that, okay, yes, we might have entered that fight, flight, or freeze, or maybe even shutdown sometimes. What activities, what healthy activities get us back to that safety state, that top of the ladder? Where do we feel safe? How can we interact with the world out of that safety zone?
Do you find as adults they might have had that safety zone prior, and now they've fallen
Mm-hmm.
down to the lower ring there, and
Yeah.
that we're trying to get them back up? How do you have that conversation with a person that might have been experiencing trauma since their earliest days of life, that might not know what their safety zone is?
Yeah, so it's a lot of the awareness piece first, obviously, safety in their body. We establish that first, and explore what might be going on there. And then it's identifying the triggers and knowing what helps. So, I mean, that right there, those few sentences might take 10 weeks or
Yeah.
more, you know. So, this is not a one conversation deal, but identifying where those triggers come from, what pops up for us, how do we respond, and how can we respond better? What activities, thoughts, actions get us back to that safety state? And then that allows us to operate more efficiently in our world and feel better about our daily routine. So that's kind of that where that therapy comes in, is what allows us to get back to that safety state. But yes, and adults could definitely come out of it, and it's fluid, right? Even somebody who hasn't experienced trauma, I enter my fight, flight, or freeze sometimes too, right? And then I have things that get me back on that baseline and I'm able to function properly again.
Yeah, that's some really good advice right there. It's a good way of looking at it from like an organized standpoint. It's like almost like
Mm-hmm.
a barometer of how do I get back to a place I want to be.
Yeah.
That's why I like it with with alcohol addicts, right? They always have the 12
Mm-hmm.
steps of things that they need to do, and it's
Mm-hmm.
fairly effective because it's a check mark. I'm here now. I've made it to this. I refuse to go backwards, because you've made it to that next thing. I like that ladder way of looking at it
Mm-hmm.
because it really helps people say, okay, day one is behind me, even though it still feels like day one. I really am 3, 4 rings up this ladder now. Man, anybody
Mm-hmm.
listening, I
Yeah.
really hope that you take note, write it down, do your own research on it. That way you can get more in depth on it. Because her and I are about coming to an end here. I did want to ask you one last question. I'm just out of my own curiosity. I would love for one of these days, if we do have you back on the show, to have you in the studio. But I know that that's a challenge right now. Do you
Mm-hmm.
find that people aren't connecting the way they should through these telehealth counseling sessions? Or do you find that because of you as a person, you're really reaching them because that's your goal and you'll see it through? Like, explain to me real quick, if you can, what that experience has been like for you.
It's definitely been challenging and different because we're not energetically in that same room. But
Yes.
emotionally and spiritually, we are. Even if you're not religious, right? Like I can tell your energy emanating from you, and how I respond non-verbally still matters so much to that rapport being built. So I still find that connections are being built. I can still see their eyes. They can see my micro expressions, and they can hear the intonation of my voice. So it still does. Obviously, it looks a little different, but I think that connection is still being made. I'm still seeing improvements from that connection, thankfully, right? And yes, that is my goal. So I'm always conscious of it and how I'm reacting, how I'm responding facially, physically, all those things. But yes, being in person has its perks too. I incorporate a lot of movement and yoga into my sessions too,
Oh,
which is a
wow.
little harder in uh, in my office, maybe
With
miles
the
away from
camera,
them.
the whole
But
thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yes,
That's
but still
interesting.
doable. And I am happy. I will say this with telehealth, the convenience of it saves many people too. So if they're not able to commute, maybe they don't have childcare, maybe their work schedule doesn't align, maybe they don't have a working car, maybe they don't have a license. They're
Right.
able to see me, and that's taking one barrier away from that accessibility. So that I will be eternally grateful for.
So, Andrea, before we go, then, is there any way that anybody that might have been listening to this show or that is going to listen in the future, if they would like to contact you specifically, can they, or do they have to go and then be assigned to you? How does it work? How can people reach out to Andrea Rumler?
Yeah, they can absolutely request me if they want to be a client. Counseling Center of West Michigan, I'm on their page. You can look me up there. I have Instagram and social media, but that's probably not the best way for professional work. So, yeah, I would say Counseling Center of West Michigan. And you can find me right there under therapist.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I promised her 1 hour show. We're at 59 seconds or 59 minutes and 40 seconds. She's been great. You guys are great. The comment section here really blown up. Andrea, I'm really appreciated you being here. I know that we had to do it earlier in the day and you accommodated me. And I just want to say again, this meant the world to me that we did this, and hopefully we will do it again. I really hope that you come back. So.
Well, I'll have you know I'm a list person, and we only got to 2 things on my list, so I got to come back.
You definitely got to be back. I had a list too. It's so funny. We got to 2 things on my list. So, ladies and gentlemen, yes. As always, this is Bobby Talks. I'm Robert Gifford. This was Andrea Rumler. We are into our 34th episode of the show. I really hope you guys are enjoying what you've been listening to. Check us out. Please follow, subscribe, share, do the whole thing. I'm on every single social media platform at Bobby Talks 3 Dots. Do it the right way. Share and subscribe. As always, we'll see you guys on down the road. Enjoy.